Next part of section 1.5 is talking about writing and solving equations. So we solved equations earlier. Now we're going to take word problems and write equations from them and then solve those equations. And this is a hard part of algebra for a lot of students. So don't be surprised if after you listen to this explanation, look through the book, you still have trouble with these. There's an art to it. It'll take you a lot of practice to do it. So work with other people, see how they think about it. Talk to me in class. Talk to people at the math angle. Practice these a lot, and you'll get a handle on them if you work at them enough. So in your book, there are several word problem tips. And one of them is called use words, and that's the one we're going to do here. Sometimes people have an easier time approaching a word problem by just trying to say in a sentence what's going on in the word problem. And then you can take that sentence and make it into an equation. So here's an example. This says the bookstore has 40 pencils in the display rack plus 20 boxes of pencils in the back storeroom. If the bookstore's total inventory is 280 pencils, how many pencils are in each box? So the problem solving protocol that we've been using, first thing it tells us to do is figure out what the variable is and give it a name. So in this case, we're doing let P equals the number of pencils in each box. And frequently we can get this by just looking at the question in the word problem. Because what we're trying to find is what we assign a variable to. That way we can write an equation, solve it, and then we'll know what the variable is, what the number is for the variable. So this one says how many pencils are in each box, so we start with let P equals number of pencils in each box. So then we're going to try to write an equation. That's the next step in our VESI process that your book talks about. And using this tip that we're using here, we're going to try to use words first. So we say display pencils plus storeroom pencils equals the total inventory. So we get this just by looking back at the problem, and the problem says the bookstore has 40 pencils in the display rack plus 20 boxes of pencils in the back storeroom. If the bookstore's total inventory is 280 pencils, how many pencils are in each box? So the way I do these is I'm literally visualizing a bookstore, 40 pencils in the display rack. I'm visualizing the back room having a bunch of boxes. And then I look at, we're talking about the total inventory, and so I know I'm thinking of the 40 pencils out front plus the 20 boxes in the back, and they'll give me the total inventory. And so that's where we get this word equation here. Then we're going to convert that into a little bit more of an equation. We're still going to use words, but make it a little more of a mathematical equation. So we just say display pencils plus storeroom pencils equal the total inventory. And so we just converted that down here. So taking what we had from the previous slide, now we're going to put in the numbers that we know. Display pencils we said was 40 pencils. We got that from the original problem statement. The storeroom pencils, we don't know how many of those are, but we know it's 20 boxes. And remember, we decided to call our variable P is the number of pencils per box. So we know we have 20 boxes with P pencils in each box. And then the original problem statement also said we have a total of 280 pencils. So now we're going to make that into our full algebraic equation. 40 plus 20p equals 280. Now that we've written the equation, we can just go back to what we did in the last video. We're just going to solve the equation. So we look at our variable, we see what's happening to it, what's being done, and then we'll undo it. So the first thing that's happening to it is we're multiplying by 20. Then we're adding 40. So to undo that, we're going to subtract 40, opposite operation, and then we're going to divide by 20. So let's actually do that. So our original equation is 40 plus 20p equals 280. What our directions are telling us to do is first subtract 40. So I'm going to subtract 40 from both sides. These cancel out and I end up with 20p equals 240. Next thing our directions tell us to do is divide both sides by 20. And so we end up with p equals 12. We're going to check our solution in two different ways. So the first way is just checking it in the equation. And remember what we're doing here is just seeing if we solve the equation correctly. It isn't going to tell us whether we wrote the correct equation, which is actually the hard part, but we're just going to check and see if we solved the equation that we wrote correctly. So we put in our proposed solution, and we ask, is that equal to 280? So that's 40 plus 240, and that does equal 280. So at least we solved our equation correctly. We don't really know whether we did the equation, whether we wrote the correct equation to begin with. So this second thing that says check our solution in the problem, does it make sense? This is not an absolute way to check anything. It's just a way to see if you messed up in a big way. You're looking at your answer. We're saying that P is 12. Remember, P is the number of pencils per box. And so we're just asking, does that make sense? Does 12 pencils in a box make sense? Now, you don't know whether that's correct or not, but if you had 4,000 pencils per box or 0.8 pencils per box, you'd know you were probably wrong. So 12 seems like it's in the ballpark, so we're going to say that it does make sense. Again, that doesn't mean for sure that we're right. It just means we have some reason to believe that we are. And then write the answer as a sentence. That's there, remember, to remind you to know what it is you just solved for, so that you can do that kind of mental check to see if this seems right. So we said on the original thing that P was the number of pencils per box. So we're going to say there are 12 pencils